a special announcement and promotion running with this podcast. We have a free giveaway with Carmichael, the guest. So if you enjoy what you see today, you can win a free session with him, 45 minutes worth $300. All you have to do is check the description below for your chance to win. I hope you enjoy the show and good luck. On today's podcast, we welcome an expert in poker mindset and performance, working one-to-one with hundreds of players from 32 different countries in various formats. We're excited to dig deep today with Mr. Adam Carmichael. Welcome to the podcast, Adam. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for the intro. I'm doing great, thanks. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Hopefully we can share some knowledge for the audience and some good takeaways that they can practically use.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. I mean, I think this side of poker is really coming to the forefront now. People are really understanding how important it is. But just talk to us how you even got into it. I mean, this is super niche, right? You're like poker mindset coach. It's really, really niche. How did you even get into this and why are you doing it?
Yeah, very good question. So I'll tell a short version. So basically, I started poker myself in 2011, played poker for 6 years. It heads up, sit and goes. And I was living in Thailand originally, then Bali. Yeah, me and my housemates basically went from the lowest stakes through to the highest stakes in our format. And on that journey, I basically developed a lot of performance habits and dealt with a lot of problems. I was not the guy who was naturally good at poker. I struggled with emotions. I struggled with getting myself to do stuff. I struggled with self-doubt and all the kind of mindset issues. And over that 6-year journey, I managed to establish a good set of protocols to almost overcome problems, and mainly in the kind of performance realm. I was very good at performing at a high level and getting the most out of myself. So anyway, as I was coming towards 2017, I was getting to a point where I felt like I wanted to change the direction. I was poker myself. I felt like I'd achieved what I wanted to in poker. I was in a great financial situation, and I'd always been into coaching. As a youngster, I used to coach sport. I did sports science at university. There was a big practical element of that. A lot of my school teachers thought I would be a teacher. And I always just liked sharing knowledge. And basically I learned stuff and then try to reshare what I've learned to friends or the people who would listen. And I got me thinking as I was progressing in poker, what problems are poker players facing? And could I start solving those problems? In all honesty, I didn't know if I could. So I started to reach out to some players who I thought I could potentially help. And I started from the performance angle in terms of helping players build high performance habits, how to show up in the right way, because that's what I was doing day to day and living it. And then as I went deeper into performance coaching, so I started signing on my first clients towards the end of 2017 as an experiment for myself to see if I could help players. I was getting really good feedback, but I was also encountering a big thing called the mind and mindset. And I realized, whoa, it's not as simple as getting the right performance habits. There's a lot of mindset problems. So for the past 5 years, I basically spent my days trying to come up with solutions to the most common mindset problems and building systems and structures to tackle the very unique problems that poker players face. And when you go deep into that world, you realize that there's only a finite amount of problems, but they come up in various different ways. So basically for myself, the way I've coached, it's always been things I've learned for myself and then I apply those to others. And then over the last 5 years, I've been working with players around the world. And I chose to focus on poker just because I'd lived and breathed it for so long. And I just resonate with a poker player so deeply. When a poker player speaks to me, I'm like, you're me. At one stage of my life, I was you. I just know the problems. And even if I haven't experienced every problem they have, I've got this relatability because I've been through that experience. And that just, from my perspective, allows me to relate to them and help them solve their problems. So that's the kind of short answer of how I got into this path.
Yeah, it's really cool. So you're obviously speaking from a lot of experience, and poker player is quite a lonely profession. You don't really have anyone to turn to. It's almost like managing a small business, and there's all these other things, not just playing poker. You can be good at poker, but there's so many other areas that you have to really, really look out for. So what are the most common problems people need to look out for? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, there's a whole host of issues depending on the individual, what stage they're at. So let's say a new player, let's say they're in their first few years. Some of the biggest problems they experience are how to show up at the poker tables consistently and put in volume and study, how to be a professional in what you do. Because generally players get into poker because they don't want the 9 to 5, they don't want to work. So they come in with this kind of freedom. That's a freedom.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. And it's a great kind of like, it's a great drive to begin with, but very quickly you have problems. Structuring your day becomes a very big challenge. And yeah, basically you're dragged around by distractions very frequently. So that's an ongoing problem with structure that players face. Then we've got the problem with dealing with bad variance, dealing with bad results, dealing with the emotions that come up when things aren't going your way. The first 1 to 2 years, or even 2 to 3 years as a poker player is quite brutal because you're not used to losing large sums of money. You're not used to trying hard at something and getting slapped in the face because variance went against you. You're not used to experiencing all the self-doubt and insecurity around your game and having all these unknown questions that you're trying to figure out. And there's no real answers like concrete, yes, well done, you've won. It's constant kind of mixed feedback. So poker players very much struggle with dealing with emotions that come up at the poker tables and how to deal with variance and basically playing the best poker during that. So that's the first phase. And then I think once they get through that, players struggle, or generally they cap themselves with their belief systems. So I think a lot of players get, let's say you're successful, you're a good prodigy, you're a good ambitious player. You'll get to a point where, say you'll play mid stakes, let's say you play 100 NL. A lot of players kind of cap themselves there because they go from never having that much money through what they were doing to being very comfortable. Things get very comfortable all of a sudden, and you can easily get trapped at like kind of the mid stakes or higher low stakes because all of a sudden you can cover living costs. There's no survival needs. Life's quite nice, and it seems like a risk to go to the higher stakes. So players can get stuck in like kind of their own mental models that keeps them trapped from shooting higher. So yeah, then if you do shoot higher, you've got the whole kind of self-doubt, risk to reward ratios. But yeah, the same problems keep coming up. The emotions come up over and over. How you get the best out of yourself on a daily basis is always an issue. And yeah, it's kind of all weaved into those kind of problems.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot there to look at, and I like the way it's taken from a journey. I remember the first few years myself. I mean, the emotions are just like absolutely brutal. You know, everyone has an emotional attachment to money, and just like you said, like everyone judges success in poker by winning and loss, and you can't control that in poker. And then if you're just out of control every day, it's just you're all over the place. So it's really interesting. So, like, can anyone learn these skills, or you know? Can anyone be like a great poker player and learn these basic mindset skills? Or is it like, you know, actually really, you know, only certain people are suited to poker?
Well, first of all, I like the way you worded that. You said, can anyone learn these skills?
Yeah.
And the clue is in that wording, they're skills, and skills can be learned. Skills can be developed. There's no talent. They're not talents. They're not traits that are inbuilt. They're skills that need to be fine-tuned. So from my experience with coaching players, there's 8 skills that players need to develop for mindset and performance. And all of them, every single one of them is very trainable. Now, depending on your baseline and where you start from, you may have a lot of work to get to a solid level. Let's say you're a complete train wreck with your emotions. Yeah. The skill you need to learn is emotional regulation. Okay. You might be an absolute like tilt box, constantly going heightened emotions, but you can learn the skill to manage those emotions and to basically deal with heightened emotions over time. But it takes longer to get you to a baseline. So yeah, in general, all the skills, well, almost in all cases, all the skills can be learned, and it just takes the right progression. Now, the problem is with mindset and performance, from my perspective, of being in this market 5 years, often the advice or the kind of guidance given to players is very generic. All right, so let's say you're really struggling with one of the skills. Let's say it's self-awareness, or it's focus, or it's emotional regulation, which are high-level mindset performance skills. You can get advice that is given from an expert or someone from a real high level, and they go, oh, just do this and just do this. And the problem is you haven't developed the understanding of what the skills needed, and you haven't built the baseline fundamentals to develop that skill. So you always need to understand where this player is currently, what's his current framework, what's his current abilities with this skill, and you need to train him from there. So an example I would use is, imagine you're learning tennis, all right? And you start watching Federer and Nadal playing. These guys are amazing. That's a great backhand. And Nadal's doing a double-handed backhand, and Federer's doing a one-handed backhand. Wow, I need to start replicating this. So you start copying what the experts do, and you're like, oh, you're struggling with the basics, and lo and behold, you don't improve over the course of a few months. On the flip side, if you went to a coach and they went, look, wait a second, you're not holding the racket properly. This is what you need to be focusing on, all the simple stuff, and build the beginner skills. It's the same in poker when you see like really elite players or amazing players will watch them and go, oh, they're doing this or they're doing that, and they'll try and copy those strategies, and it's way too advanced for them. It's not what they need. They need the beginner skills. It's the same for mindset. It's the same for dealing with your emotions or focusing. Very often players will give advice that's working for them at a high level, but they'll misunderstand the exact framework. So when you break a skill down, the way I coach players, I teach them how a skill works. So what are the kind of fundamentals of how a skill is developed, and what are the things you need to be working on? What's the sub-skills within this skill? I then assess players for that skill. So before I coach them, I give them a grading. Are you a beginner, intermediate, or elite for the skill we're going to work at? And that from there, that will change how I coach them. So if they're a beginner with emotional regulation, for example, they're all over the place. We need to start very slow. We need to really start, okay, this is how emotions function. This is how it feels in the body. We need to start getting some small wins. If we start trying to deal with massive anger episodes and tilt outbursts that are really, really challenging, that's hard. They're like elite skills that we need to develop later. So it's always understanding where the player is at and giving them the right context and the right training relative to where they're at. But yeah, all the skills can be developed. Sometimes you need patience, a lot of patience. I'd say my biggest error as a coach, especially in the first 2 years, I was way too ambitious with how much I thought players could pick up and how quickly they could go through a framework. I was like, let's do this and let's do this and let's do this. And I was trying to rush too much with how much they could take on. Now I understand the coaching process is patience, and you need to basically understand the next step to take to, and however long that step takes, you need that patience to build that bridge.
Yeah, it's behavioral. That's the thing. We're not robots, unfortunately. The behavioral process takes a lot of time and work. But for, like, in practical sense, let's go to the emotional regulation. Like, and someone's blasting and tilting. What would be like some of the small, simple steps that you'd say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and that's where we're going to leave it? Yeah.
All right. So first of all, almost all skills start with building awareness. All right. Okay. So you need to build awareness around what's currently going on. So what I would do is get that player over the course of a week to take note of what emotions they're experiencing. Are you experiencing it? What are the heightened emotions? What are the negative emotions? Just keep track for a whole week. What's causing it? All right. So that's the first thing. What emotions am I struggling with? Then maybe write down the 1 or 2 emotions that are most challenging, they're coming up most often. It could be frustration, it could be anger, it could be boredom, it could be annoyance. What's your unique profile? Because we're all individual, we've got different cocktails of emotions. So that's the first thing. Then I want them to start building a framework of what situations are causing those emotions. All right. So the way I look at emotions, they're coming generally based on a trigger. And a trigger is basically our interaction with our external world. So as a poker player, that's generally, as you're playing poker, something happens that you don't like or you didn't want to happen. Your opponent gets lucky, you're losing during a session. That's like the trigger event. All of a sudden, that emotion starts to come up in your body and you start to experience it. So we start to get clear what are the triggers, what things are causing these responses. Then we need to map out exactly what is happening in your body, how you're feeling. So we need to, again, build more awareness around how it feels in the body and then what the mind does. All right. So there's this interaction between body and mind. So when the body feels certain things, like, I feel my heart rate goes a bit faster, I feel a bit of tension in my hands, I feel a bit of blood boiling in my face. Yeah, I feel that. So we get good at spotting the signatures of this is the emotion, this is how it feels in the body. Then I start asking, what's the mind doing? How does the mind start to think? Well, the mind starts saying, well, this guy's an idiot, doesn't deserve it. This whole story of events that the mind creates based on the emotion. So all this is in the meaning. The meaning that you're giving events is based on the mind. So I map out the framework of you're experiencing certain emotions. There's a trigger event that's causing that. There's a feeling in the body, and the mind's then getting active because of that feeling. Then we go downstream of that and we start mapping out the responses. Okay, so when that happens, what do you normally do? Well, I get really angry and I start playing really fast, I start tilting, or I quit my session. Okay, cool. Let's get the responses, the behaviors that you're doing as a byproduct. All right, so now we've got the whole framework, and then we need to start doing the work. All right, so that's the whole, I often spend up to a week just getting that kind of framework of what is going on, because very often we try to jump to solutions, but we need to spend enough time diagnosing the problem and giving the player the power. Because as a coach, I don't want to be the coach that goes, right, this is what we're doing all this. I want the player to be exploring themselves. Go, look, let's watch it. You watch it. You get very curious about your own experience, and you report to me how you're experiencing, and then together we'll work for the problem. So then you've got to look at the main kind of thing we can change is the meaning that you're giving events. Well, there's two angles of emotional regulation. One is understanding that the feelings you're experiencing are normal. So a lot of poker players struggle with emotions because we're so in our minds, and we feel like the mind can rationalize situations and not have to deal with emotions because emotions are so below us, and we shouldn't be having to deal with this because we're so smart and we're so beyond this. And when you get past that, when you go, right, the emotion is coming up, the cells in the body, get comfortable with the emotion, understanding, get curious of how it's feeling in the body. And then we need to understand the mind is telling you a very skewed or inaccurate story. It's not telling you the correct information. So let's break down the mind story. Let's break down when you feel this way, what the mind story is, and can we come up with a more accurate story for the situation? Can we change the meaning that you're giving this event? So, for example, if a player hits like a bad run of variance and he's telling himself, I'm working so hard, I'm just getting unlucky, life's just so unfair, poker's just constantly throwing me around, I don't deserve this, I'm better than this. That's going to create a really visceral response in the body, and it's going to lead to the response that he doesn't want downstream. If we look at the meaning and go, okay, what's actually happening here? What's actually going on? You're having some bad variance. This is just poker. Can we frame this whole event and this emotion in a different context? And that takes work, because we've got to unbreak the old behavioral patterns, the thought patterns that come up habitually. We've got to rewire in new ways of thinking. And this is like the hard part, because you've got to catch the emotion, catch the old stories, and go, wait a second, opportunity to change the meaning I'm giving this event. And if we can work on that and realize, if I change the meaning that I give this event, it takes a lot of repetition, it takes a lot of understanding that you're causing the problem to escalate. The initial emotion's fine, but you're causing the emotion to escalate by creating this narrative of a story. If we can change that story, to something that's more accurate for the situation, all of a sudden we can avoid all the downstream effects of the emotion. So that'll be the get a quick win.
Right, it's quite a process. I mean, it's very in depth. Like, there really is a clear sequence and process of dealing with this and understanding what's going on. And it's almost like you said diagnosis, like a doctor almost. Really got to find out what's going on, and that takes some time. Like, what's the success rate on these things? I mean, I guess players have come to you. Are there any that are just like, just couldn't work past it, or like, what's the general success rate in these types of things?
Yeah, so players can come to me with very specific problems. Like, Adam, this is the problem I'm having. It's coming up like 4 times a week. I'm losing X amount of buy-ins, and we can tackle that problem. And that's a very high success rate. So when we deal on one problem, because we get very specific. However, when we don't go deep enough, if we don't solve the root cause, if you don't get comfortable with actually being able to experience emotions, if you avoid, so basically it takes work. So the ones who fail, the ones who can't make progress long-term, are the ones who can't get past, they are using their mind to try and push down the emotion. They want to rationalize everything, and they don't want to almost like open up the emotional box, because it's quite scary. When we experience emotions, there's a lot of fear that comes with that. That's, it might not work out. We feel vulnerable when we allow emotions to come through. And a lot of the players who don't make progress in this area, don't want to almost let anything go through. So they just use the mind over and over to rationalize things or to not experience things. And yeah, if you're not willing to go deep enough with the problem, it'll appear in different ways. So a player could come to me with a very specific problem. I'm tilting in this way, and we could solve the problem at that exact level that he was wanting. But because he hasn't understood where it was coming from, what the root cause was, what the fear, the insecurity, what stories he was telling himself about a lot of life events, not just this specific one, it will just re-show up in different ways. So I'd say a high success rate on the players who are willing to understand the frameworks. That's why, like, I think probably 9 months ago, it was probably a year ago when I really, really decided I was going to redo my approach to coaching. The more time I spend on diagnosing and teaching players exactly how the whole framework works, the more success rate you have. Because if not, you rely on the coach, me for example, to help you solve the problem. You're like, I've got a problem. Adam can help me fix that. When in reality, I want to go, this is how the problem works. This is exactly what's going to happen in many different situations. If you understand this part of it, this process, you can fix your own problem. So when other things appear, you can solve them because you know, it's an emotion. It's a trigger event. I feel this way. This is the meaning I'm giving it. You can watch all these things. And if you build that self-awareness, you can solve your own problems. So if I do my job well as a coach, the players are skilled enough to solve their problems ongoing, which becomes a much higher success rate than just solving one-by-one problems.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds not just super valuable for the one skill that you're trying to teach them, but like you said, I mean, if you're teaching them the process and that works for the other areas, then I guess it's like the golden secret. And I guess that transfers to life quite a bit as well with the awareness and solving these problems, because they're behavioral. So if you can solve this for poker, I mean, you can also use this process for other life areas, I guess, as well.
100%. Yeah. So the first skill I teach, I do a program called the Poker Athlete, where we work on 8 skills over the course of 8 weeks. Skill number 1 is self-awareness. Okay. And it's all about understanding yourself. And without no awareness, there is no development. We can't improve skills and level up if we don't have the awareness. And we need to understand ourselves. And this is the hard part. This is why players struggle so much. It's because they lack that awareness. And as a result, they're disconnected from the solution that they would know, because they can't see where the problem's coming from. They're trying to deal with the root, like the ends byproduct of what's happening, but they've no idea what's going on. And we haven't been trained on how to do that. So I spend the first week of my coaching with players teaching them how to build self-awareness, what it's like to go internal, how to know your belief systems, how to know where all the things are coming from, and what's causing it. But every skill starts with an element of awareness. We need to build awareness around what is going on with that. And very often players are impatient and they will go, just tell me what to do. I just want to know it. Just tell me give me the bullet points, give me the points to live them. And like I said, when I first coached, I wanted just to go straight to the answers. Yeah. As I've got more experience in coaching, I've realized spend more time diagnosing, spend more time getting the player to understand exactly what's going on, building awareness. And once you get that awareness, the player starts to get empowered and goes, I see now. I see what's going on now. I see how this works. And once the player sees how it works, they're like, it's a game. I can get this skill better. And all of a sudden, it's not this. I think emotions are very challenging for poker players because they don't fit into a logical framework. So poker players are just like, I just don't want to have emotions. They think the goal is to be a robot and to be void of emotions. They think that's the end goal. If I could just remove a part of my brain and my heart so I didn't feel emotions, yes, I'd be so good at poker. When in reality, it's like, no, you want the richness of the experience of being a human, but you need to realize, okay, emotions are coming up and you need to be able to manage them, to deal with them as you're playing poker in a healthy way. So the awareness is huge, and helping players build awareness is fundamental to the way I coach.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness is something that I think is just incredibly important. Like you say, it's the starting step. I mean, if you're not aware of what's going on, you can't really fix anything. It's just putting a band-aid over it and not really tackling the root cause. So, like, how do you even begin to tackle awareness? Like, because most people would be like, okay, yeah, so how do I do that? Do I just watch what I'm doing, or like, what's the process for that?
Yeah, always. It's a long road, but it's a fun road. It's an exploration. Okay, so the first thing I take players on is a kind of journey into understanding that you've been conditioned through your life experiences. All right, so things have happened when you're young. Generally, a lot of things in your childhood, for your early adulthood, and as a result, you've been conditioned to think in a certain way. Now, without doing any reflecting, you'll continue to live out your life based on a set of belief systems that you've instilled like deep in your subconscious, and you live out this life kind of blindly. Once you stop and you realize every single human on planet Earth has been conditioned for their experiences, you then start to go, well, what experiences have conditioned me? Where do I have the most struggle with my belief systems? Where am I hold myself back? Where am I struggling experience? So then we go on exploration to find the belief systems that are holding you back. Which areas are you running into obstacles more frequently? Which areas are you struggling to make progress when you should be able to make progress, but you don't? You self-sabotage yourself. Could be with money. Could make money, then sabotage yourself. Could be relationships. You could have a good relationship, then you blow it. It could be you struggle to progress with poker because you struggle to try hard because you've always cruised through stuff. When things get hard, you quit. It's all these things that are a good sign that there's a belief system in there based on your past experiences. So we spend time bringing all that to the surface because it's all in the subconscious. It's all based on subconscious programs, and we need to bring those to the awareness. So I look at trends that are happening in their lives. I get them to look at the common areas, like I said, with their careers, with poker, with finances, with relationships, with health, all the stories that you're telling yourself, and map them out. So then we start to look at what you believe in all these areas. What are the belief systems that are holding you back? And then we go through a whole process of trying to upgrade those belief systems. But the first step, like I said, it's the awareness phase. So it's all about just understanding you have been conditioned. Let's understand what your conditioning is. And once you start to look underneath, almost like lift the hood up of the car, look underneath, you're like, this stuff here. Yeah. You want to just slam it shut and go, no. I can picture probably 8 years ago when I started doing my own kind of exploration with self-awareness. And I was just like, whoa, I don't like this. I do not like it one bit. As soon as I heard the word beliefs and I started going there, I would just tighten it up. I just go, oh no, there's something there. I don't want to touch it. No. And I could see those areas of my life I was really struggling to progress with. And I was like, there's something there. There's something holding me. I'm holding myself back more than anything. It just felt frustrating. So it's like you run into an obstacle and it's like you who's causing it, but it doesn't solve the problem. If I say you're causing your own problem, don't do that. It's like, okay, well, what do I do? But once you understand the case, it's based on old conditioning, which is a story that you're telling yourself based on a past experience that you've repeated so many times that it feels real. You start to explore that and you realize, wait a second, these stories I'm telling myself, they're not that true. Maybe when I was 6 years old, it was true, or 5 years old, but now I'm an adult and I'm carrying that same story over. I'm still seeking validation from people. When I used to do that when I was a kid to fit into the playground, there's lots of stuff going on in my current life, and then you start to see the pattern. So that's the first step, and then it comes to upgrading your belief systems. And then I think the kind of highest level change is understanding your identity, your current identity. So that's basically anything you say after the words I am, fill in the blank. When you put thoughts in the viewer's minds, but you create an identity for yourself. And once you realize that identity is just a construct of your mind based on your past experiences, not what's going forward, you've created this little narrative. It might sound nice, it might sound great. All the stuff you've done in your life might sound awesome, but there's a lot of limitation in that story. It's the identity you've created. It's got a lot of sharp edges, big box around it that says, I can do this, can't do that, don't do this, don't try that, good at this, bad at that. So we create this whole box for ourselves. So then we start to explore, what's your current identity? What's the current box you've created for yourself? And what happens if we create a new identity, a new box to live in, which isn't based on your past experiences. It's based on who you're going to be from this day as you're doing this exercise going forward. Imagine we create a new identity. And first of all, players face resistance with this because like, well, I can't do that because all these things happened and this is me. Like they hold on to their old identity. Very, very rigid. It feels like them. They feel like it's their personality when it's actually just a bag of stories and constructs they've created. So then we started going to a new narrative of a new identity. How do we create a new identity? And that's the big shift. Create a new identity that's in line with your future goals. And what actions do you need to take to solidify that new identity? But it goes through a process of beliefs, character traits, identity, and then a whole like kind of process to explore that.
Well, I said we were going deep today, and I think we definitely hit that. But it's exactly the same. Like, you know, I use the example as well with exercise. You know, people work out for a few weeks, months, and then don't see any change and go back to. Whereas really, they haven't changed their identity on that area. You know, it's really the habits and identity that change, because the person who works out 5 times a week will never have to worry about losing weight or being healthy, because that's just who they are. So it's a completely different. So in terms of like your own journey, like what were some of the like toughest things that you open the hood and you're like, wow, okay, I need to tackle this, otherwise I'm not going where I want to go.
Yeah. So the biggest one, or the most obvious one I was facing, was my relationship with money.
Okay.
And this was due to being from a poor family, let's call it. Never had much money. And in my household, money was always very elusive. And it was always like, oh, don't spend money. Well, you've got a little bit. Don't be reckless with it. It was always this very scarcity mindset, limited money. Then when I got into my kind of 18 to kind of mid-20s age, when I started living for myself, I got into lots of bad habits. And for some reason, I started priding myself on being the most broke person that I knew. I don't know why I did this, but I started of all my friends, I was the most broke. When my friends had an overdraft at uni, I found a way to get 2 overdrafts, which means double the debt. I found a way to always have less money. And I didn't even know why I was doing this, but I created a narrative. I don't need money. I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I used to have fun. Nothing to worry about. So this, at the age of 18 and 23, there was no problems, no real problems, but I was just always broke. It was just a narrative. Then I started going to poker, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, actually, there's potential to make good money. And as time progressed, so the first year was just a kind of feeling out phase, but making money, but spending it to kind of fund the life I was living. Then the second year, I was starting to make good money. And the money that was coming in, like for poker, the second year was enough where I should have been like pretty comfortable. But at the end of the year, I was still at very little. I had enough to play my games, but not much more. Then the third year, I hit supernova elite volume for the first time, and I got good profits for that year. And I remember at the end of the year, I was topping up my last kind of rewards for supernova elite, which is like 100K for the year, plus winnings for that year. And I was like, oh, finally, I'm going to get a lot of money. And I remember literally as I got the money in, I think I ended up with something like 50K for the year, when I should end up with a lot more. And then I was doing some splits with my housemates, where basically there was 3 of us living together, and we were sharing our kind of EV, sharing EV.
Yep,
and one of my friends had ran like something like 80 to 100K below EV.
Okay.
So I owed him like 30K or something. So this thing, I remember it was like January 4th. I was like, and then I remember like, so I got the money, got it in. Then he messaged me and said, oh, Adam, you owe, this is my graph for the year. You owe this much. Can you send to this account? I was like, shit, that's awesome. I sent it across. And I was like, back to where I was. And I was so heartbroken, but I was just like demoralized. I was like, I'm grinding every hour. Supernova elite volume was very taxing. And I was going, what is going on here? And everyone around me who was doing similar stuff was like progressing financially. They were doing way better. Some of my friends were already buying like houses and stuff. I'm like, how am I still broke when we're kind of doing the same thing? I'm not even like the worst player. And that's when I realized I've got issues with money. And I was just finding ways to spend money and finding ways to sabotage myself. So then I started to look and go, what's my relationship with money? As soon as I started to look under, I felt so much unease. I felt, oh, I don't even want to think about it. I was basically avoiding thinking about money. I thought if I made enough, all my money problems would go away. But as soon as I looked at it, underneath, I was telling myself stories. I'm broke. I don't deserve money. If I get money, it's going to go. All this scarcity, if you get some, hold on to it. All these kind of narratives that were going on that will hold me back. So I had to really, really explore that. It took me at least 6 months of really like mapping out what was going on in my mind and understand I'm telling myself a story about why being broke is part of my part of my identity, how I'm always going to be broke. And it's amazing when you're telling yourself these very strong stories, how your life plays out as a reflection of that. Almost like a mirror image of these kind of stories. Even though you're doing things that should be counter that, life just sends you down little narratives and things happen. A bill comes at the wrong time. And it's just like, wow. So yeah, once I explored that, I realized I was the problem, and I started to upgrade my kind of belief system around money. And this took a while. I remember my first step towards doing this, because I was always like so broke and struggling. I remember I said to myself, I remember reading some investment books, and it's like, okay, you need to invest to get kind of rich, whatever. And I remember going, okay, I'm going to set up an investment account, and I'm going to, for the first time in my life, rather than spending money, I'm going to start investing money into this account. So I remember setting up like a monthly direct debit of £100, like nothing crazy. And I remember that going on for the course of a few months, and I was like, oh, £100, didn't notice that. I'll do 200, didn't notice that. And I kept upping it till I got to like 500 or 600 or something. And I just did it like automatic, so it just came out my account. I remember at the end of the year, again, not that much money in my normal accounts, but this one account, I was like, there's 5K extra in there. I didn't even notice it coming out. So I was like, all right. So all of a sudden, and then I started to identify, wait a second, maybe I'm an investor. Maybe I'm saving towards my future. And all of a sudden, like the narrative what I was telling myself started to slowly erode. So it started to erode a little bit, because I was aware of what I was telling myself. So I was creating a new narrative. So now I was reinforcing, I'm an investor. I invest in the future. I'm working towards financial freedom. And I just completely doubled down on that narrative over and over and reinforced that one. So yeah, it could go on forever with this kind of story, but in short, it's identifying I was limiting myself, but with the way the stories I was telling myself, I need to create a new narrative and a new story. But first I need to flesh out what am I thinking? What am I doing? Why am I stopping myself in this area? And I could see, as soon as I went and looked, I could see hundreds of examples from my childhood, hundreds of examples from my youth, where I was taking pride in being the broke person. My identity was I'm broke, and I don't mind, because I'm creating a narrative, and I need to smash that. I need to break that so hard and create a new narrative and a new identity that allows me. As soon as I did that, all of a sudden, almost from that moment forward, I never had any money problems. All right, all the problems were just, I created them all. It was all me. Yeah.
It was super interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that story. It was really impactful, and like, it's just so interesting how something so simple, like as a story like that, can just impact how you're living your life. It's really, really powerful. And I think a lot of these, and because it's so small, it's so easy to go unnoticed. And like you said, it's from your childhood, which you just don't think very much of anymore. You just keep going. So yeah, I mean, tell us, in terms of working with you, what courses do you have? What programs do you have? What can people expect?
Yes, I'm very excited about my new coaching program. I say new, it's been going for 8 months, but I'm relaunching it next month. And every time I relaunch it, it feels like it's new, because I put I upgrade it. But yeah, basically, like I said earlier, about a year ago, I started to re-examine my approach to coaching overall. And I wanted to help players where they're at. And exactly what you said earlier, teaching players skills, teaching players how to train skills. So like I said, like, players are always like, will this work for me? Can I have success? Is it going to be a long-term solution, or is it going to be short-term? And once you really understand like skills, and you actually fine-tune skills, you don't forget them. Like when you learn to drive or ride a bike, you don't forget it. When you learn how to play tennis to a decent standard, you don't just wake up one morning and forget how to serve. You learn a skill, and once you get enough repetition of that skill becomes something you can fall back on. Yes, you might need to have some fine-tuning of it, but once you develop skills, they last for quite a long time, so you can get good at them. So I basically decided to design a program around building the key skills for elite poker performance. And I started really thinking, what skills do you need to train? Now, myself, I was always an athlete. I did middle distance running from age 11 till 23. I competed in events around the country. I did sports science at university to study sports performance and how to get into the mind of sports stars. So I've always identified with the athlete approach to learning and getting better. Now, it was so funny, because I did all the sports stuff, then I did a poker career, and I never linked the two together. I just like, well, sports for the body, and poker is this whole mental thing, so just this completely separate. And as I started to explore further, I was like, wait a second, what if you approach poker like an athlete? And I really started to dive deep into this concept of training skills. If you train skills, because athletes train skills towards certain goals. So I decided to restructure everything I did coaching-wise around training skills towards specific outcomes. So for my poker athlete program, I take on 10 players. So we have a group environment, we have weekly live coaching, and we work on one skill per week. Now, at the start of that week, we assess the skill. So everyone, we need to know, are you really good at the skill? Do you completely suck? What's your current level? So you get given a score out of 50 through an assessment I do for each skill. You get given a a kind of grading, beginner, intermediate, elite, just to know where you are on your kind of learning path. And then we go through a coaching process, which, as I've been talking today, I get players to understand how the skill functions, what is actually going on, how do we understand what the mechanisms of this skill are, and how can we start to upgrade it. So that's generally 2 to 3 hours of coaching content plus a live coaching session to give players the actual framework of what's going on and how to upgrade the skill. From there, they then decide on a training program. All right, so training program, if you take an assessment and you get given a low score, you will take the beginner program. You'll pass the beginner program, and then you go to the intermediate and then to the elite. But you take it in order. On the flip side, if you're already very good at a skill, let's say there's 8 skills, some of those you're going to be good at, some bad. If you're already good at it, don't waste your time doing beginner stuff. Jump into the elite, do the hard stuff, and you can fine tune that skill. So the whole kind of philosophy around the program and the coaching experience is over 8 weeks, you will have 8 scores for 8 skills before you start. And at the end of the 8 weeks, you'll have leveled up those 8 skills metrically with numbers. So you have a quantitative jump. I've got my own software where players take the assessments and they've got all graphs so they can see their before and after scores and their percentage improvements for each skill. And even more importantly, after the 8 weeks are over, you know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. So if I do my job right as a coach, you've got 8 skills that you've improved, but there's room for improvement because it's training. We need more practice, we need more repetition. So then after the 8 weeks, we go into a continuous coaching model where I coach players for the full 12 months, basically every week doing a coaching session. And we basically map out their individual training and we basically work on skills every week. And every Monday I get all my poker athletes together. There's currently 30 of us and we get into call together and basically talk about leveling up skills and where they're at in their training and how to fine tune their skills. By this time, after 8 weeks, hopefully they've learned enough so that they're self-directing their own coaching and they're using me as is this right? Should I be doing this? And I'm as guiding, but they understand the framework. So when it comes to solving problems, they're very good at solving their own problems. But at the same time, they need a little bit of guidance to make sure that they're following through and also accountability and a group environment. So yeah, so that's basically how I'm approaching coaching. I do one-on-one coaching as well, which I'm generally full at the moment, but I do have a waiting list for that. But yeah, that's the coaching experience I offer at the moment. And yeah, I take on 10 players every 8 to 10 weeks at the moment.
Okay, nice. I mean, it sounds super fun, a group environment as well. And how do you handle like accountability? So this is obviously teaching people to garner these skills for themselves. But then, like, what happens if someone's super weak at their own accountability, and after this course is finished, like, how do they tackle that problem?
Yeah, so great question. So this is the issue I found with coaching as well. When the coaching experience ends, I don't want it to be a nice 8-week fun time where they have improvements. I want ongoing training. And so over the whole program, I'm trying to instill a kind of mindset of think like an athlete. You're always training. There's always practice to be done. Always think about the skills that need to be worked on. So over the course of 8 weeks, you're building in that kind of fundamental belief system. I've got skills to work on. I've got training to do. There's things that need to be done. So at the end of the 8 weeks, we get to a point where it's almost like a very fork in the road moment where you're either going to double down on training or you're going to drift. So I spend a lot of time on that week 9. I do like a week 9 session where I basically go, right, from now on, you guys are going to start directing your own training. And this is how you do it. So I go into a framework of how to, going forward, they're going to structure their own training. I try to really get them engaged. At the flip side, if someone's not engaged, like someone's like, I'm done, and they want to drift off, I can't stop someone drifting. Yeah. But I'm literally going, right, this is what we're going to do every week. And then I have accountability by basically every Monday, we're going to check in together. You guys are going to jump on that call and we're going to discuss things together. But week 9 is really important because I want them to direct their own training. And if they never jump on a call with me again, but they train these skills every week, and I've also got a whole kind of platform so I can actually see who's interacting with what. If they're training themselves but not showing up for the coaching, amazing. I'm super happy for that. That's something that happens. They'll mess me 3 months later. I go, Adam, I haven't been on the calls, but I've been really working hard at this one. This is my new skill. I've just reassessed myself. This skill's doing really well. Thanks for the knowledge. So I basically give them all the guidance I can. But at the same time, you can't hold hands with people. You've got to give them the skills. And long term, I want them to be able to coach themselves. So that's kind of how I try to hold accountability and keep them engaged.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, I think poker, like I said, is also just very... You're by yourself most of the time. So I think if you're not really going to get to grips with doing it for yourself, it's not going to work out in the end anyway, is it? So, okay, tell us how you think poker's changed over the last decade or so.
Oh, so much. Wow. Decades. I mean, I got into poker in 2011 and it was just the wild, wild west. It's just like anything goes, like just jump in lobbies, pretend you're good and just battle people and you can get respect and stuff. So yeah, I think the main, not just like the technical side of the game, but overall poker year on year has got more professional. It's got close to a sport rather than a computer game that kids play in their bedroom. The standard to enter poker is a lot higher. It's really hard to just jump in at any sort of stake. These days, you start at the low stakes and rebuild your bankroll. Back like 10 years ago, you could jump in, you could progress very quickly in 1 to 2 years if you had the right attitude and ambition. And so now you've got to be very patient. So as you're professionalizing yourself, and the whole market of poker is more professional. On the flip side, there's way more access to information than ever before. Like 10 years ago, you literally had to either do with friends, wing it yourself. It was really, really difficult. Like loads of the knowledge that was shared was between poker players having conversations and groups of poker players living together. And basically going, this is working in our games. Oh, awesome. That sounds good. I'll start using that. So it was a lot of like just winging it kind of approaches. When now there's amazing content, amazing coaches on the strategy side. There's solvers, which allow you to know how GTO plays. Up until 2014, 2015, to know how GTO actually really played, was like a pipe dream. It's like a concept which we could never know the answer. This is what we think we do. So I think even the last, like say 6-7 years in particular, that kind of is built a lot in terms of what players actually can do. But I think that there's more information there. The ability to learn quicker is actually there, but the games are tougher overall. So you need to approach poker like a professional from the off. And I think now players are starting to understand that poker is very similar to a sport. You do need to like optimize your mindset, your performance, as well as learn the strategy side of the game. And if you neglect certain areas, like you're going to come unstuck. It's like you can't expect to kind of just wing your way through it, and just being a talented guy with numbers who understands the game on a fundamental level. It's just not enough anymore. You've got to really, really systemize your approach to getting better.
Yeah, that's for sure. I always tell people you can have as much skill as you like, but if you don't have any kind of bankroll management, I mean, you're not going to have any money to play with. So there's so many other areas that are really important, and I think not enough people really understand what actually it goes into being a poker professional. They think it's just sitting and playing, but it really is way more than that. And like you said, it's almost like being an athlete these days. You've really got to be on top of things.
Yeah, it's so like I said, it's so much more than just being a good technical player. Because like very good technical players, like obviously they've got one big box ticked, and that's great. But being able to show up and play your best technical poker every day requires a whole subset of skills. Like I said, even bankroll management has got to be taken care of, or you will fail every single time. And then it's also like, how do you deal with your emotions? How do you focus at a high level? How do you game select the right games to play for your current skill level? And there's just so many attributes that need to go into a poker player that makes it really, really challenging. It's very interesting because when like in my early career, year 3, me and my friends, maybe 2 of my friends were having a lot of success, and we thought like, oh, poker, we can teach it to our other friends. So we started like, getting other friends who we thought would be like good fits for it, like, and they could learn the technical game quite well because they're smart guys. Every one of them was a massive fail, huge fail. Okay. And we're like looking back, we're like, these didn't have the ability to understand emotions. Like they were struggling with the emotion side. This guy just couldn't focus high enough. Or this guy was relying on a spoon feed him too much. He wasn't like learning for himself. Or this guy didn't understand variance, and when it got too bad, he got too excited when things were good, and got too low when things were bad. It was always this weird like all of them had the attributes like from the outside, like certain attributes. But when you actually put it together to a package, it was like they failed for these reasons. Now as a coach, I could hopefully do a better job of teaching them, but back in those days, I was just trying to figure out myself, so I didn't have the skills to teach them.
It's true. I think it's one of those professions that there's just so many areas that, like, if you are lacking in one of them, it's going to show very badly. Like, it's really going to show. You can't just mask over that with your other ones. It's going to be quite bad. So yeah, it is the one field that's like that. Where do you think poker's headed?
Where it's heading, I think it's heading to it's probably similar to e-gaming in terms of heading towards like a more professional structure. Hopefully, if poker does a good job of marketing, it can be very good for Twitch streaming. It can be almost like events that are very, very well documented, watched, like almost like creating like the World Series. Obviously, is the perfect kind of advocate for it. But I hope poker can compete with other kind of e-gaming kind of varieties. And I think it's where it's headed, it's only going to get like more professional. And I think poker needs to build more story narratives, build more characters in poker. I think anything that's interesting over time, like sport. I love sport, and I don't love sport because I like watching a ball bounce across the court. I like the people. I like knowing, this guy's the best in the world. He's playing this guy. So I think poker, if it's going to like survive long term, needs to like create like almost like the hierarchy of who the best players are, and put them together in like kind of fun duels, which is happening now. You're seeing like the pulse battles. You're seeing like the best players battling each other, and that's amazing from a spectator point of view, because that creates that, this guy's playing this guy. You get your favorite player from here and the favorite from there, and they battle each other and play tournaments, play series. So I think creating having more of that kind of structure and making that more of a fun experience and more ranking systems. I think ranking systems are great. I know MTTs have the kind of pocket fives, creating like things so the viewer and other players, like kind of the spectators of the sport of poker, can get involved in it and go, oh yeah, this is what's happening currently. And I think for a long time, poker was very secretive, especially like say 2012 to 2019 kind of times. All the best players who are like making lots of money would be like very secretive and not share stuff. And now it's starting to be like, we can actually celebrate the best players and we can actually put them together against each other in kind of fun events. And yeah, I think the more kind of big events, obviously Triton do a great job with kind of the high roller scene at the moment. And yeah, hopefully that continues. And if it does, I think poker will continue to evolve. And yeah, hopefully there's a long-term positive future for poker.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. Like I said, I think a bit more innovation needs to occur. I think people were resting on the fact that, it's kind of, we had that boom and not really much innovation or things were going on for a while. But like that story narrative, like you said, I think is very, very important. That was the story that boomed poker, Chris Moneymaker. And that was that was the reason it boomed, was purely a story and a dream that can occur. So yeah, I completely agree with your viewpoints there.
Yeah. Well, what year did you get into poker?
That is a good question. Where is it now? So at least 13 years ago or something. So where are we? 2009? Yeah, 2009.
Yeah. At that time, were you watching the high stakes poker games with Tom Dwan, Ivy?
Definitely high stakes poker we were watching, but also we used to watch Poker Late Night on the TV.
Yeah.
Like my dad used to stick that on. You used to get, I don't know why they don't do that anymore, but the heartbeats, you'd see their heart races when they're in hand, and the characters, like Devilfish. I mean, you just don't have those kind of characters or villains or what's going on in poker today. It's like even the professionals today, the really high stakes one, there's not much character about them. It's just, they play, they're quite standard, kind of almost like a robot, even though we're not robots, but they do feel a bit like that. It's just going to be interesting how they create those characters. Maybe online there's a few more characters, like you have Spraggy and some of these other ones with the streaming. So there's a few more characters like that, but I think they definitely need to work on that somehow.
Yeah, because I think all my friends, like basically almost everyone I know who got into poker around say 2009, 2011, used to watch a lot of live poker. Whether it was the UK scene, whether it was the American scene, the Poker After Dark, the high stakes poker games. It used to be really fun watching it. Almost all the players were like, oh, aspire to be it. I want to be like that. I want to play those games. Watching Tom Dwan make like $1 million bluffs, you're like, oh, how's he doing it? It's crazy. And it's just like excitement about, wow, what's possible. It's almost like the pinnacle of your poker, the pinnacle of the sport of poker. I think, like you said, it's really important going forward that we continue to create those kind of really good personalities, really good characters. We've got obviously the live guys who can do that. And then, like you said, the streamers and the kind of online profiles, they need to be more dominant as well, or at least create like tournaments where all your favorite streamers play each other, all the best Twitch guys. So it's creating this kind of, it's the stories, the narrative of getting behind players and watching these big events. And yeah, I think that's really, really, really important going forward, because once we lost that for a long period, like once Poker After Dark stopped and high stakes poker game stopped, I think Triton are doing a great job of recalibrating that. But it's taking time. And like you said, it's really important to get the right personalities so you can watch and go, you can have a good time. Poker's one of those infinitely fun games. Like almost all my friends have had good experiences playing poker. If you have the right characters in the right game, it's fun for anyone to watch. I can watch poker endlessly if it's the right personalities playing, because it's just lots of money involved. It's also like a really fun strategy game. So I think that's an important thing going forward if poker's going to evolve.
For sure, and like the same thing happened in the new high stakes poker as well. Season 9, they brought the bricks back. Gabe was back as well, and AJ, and they were in the commentary booth just like the good old days, And creating that, like you said, the entertainment value that you think, oh, that would be so cool to go and do that one day. I think that really was something that I remember, and that's one of the reasons why I did want to do it. It was like this is a great thing to do. All right. Anything else you want to add, Adam?
No, it's been a good conversation. Hopefully the viewers have been inspired to take some action towards looking at their own self. Basically, like we covered self-awareness, we covered emotional regulation, but a lot of it's reflecting on where am I currently at and where do I need to go going forward. I think it's really important as a poker player to instill a belief system that you can get better, you can learn skills, and there's going to be strengths that you have. So if you're doing well at poker, there's generally things you're good at, maybe your ability to solve problems, your focus skills, but you've probably got things that are holding you back right now. So not shying away from those things, not trying to cover up your weaknesses with doubling down on your strengths. There's things that are holding me back. Can I explore those? Can I start working on those areas? It's the same like with a sports player. They'll have certain things that they're very good at to begin with, or very good at naturally, but then they need to work on their weaknesses. It's like, oh, this is holding you back. And the way I look at it, there's certain things that cause performance threats. All right. So if you look at a weakness, whether it's your emotions, whether it's your ability to focus, it's a performance threat. It's a threat to performance. If it gets taken to its extreme, it's a performance gets thrown off a cliff. So you need to be aware that the skills I need to develop, am I willing to work on those skills? And what are the skills that I can work on? So yeah, if you want to start exploring that, I've got a YouTube channel where I do 2 videos a week at the moment, which is good. And yeah, loads of free content for you guys to dig into on upgrading your skills, a lot of stuff about emotional regulation, how to go deeper there. A lot of players are struggling with their emotions. But yeah, start thinking about how can I be working on my skills in terms of mindset performance in order to become a better player long term.
Yeah, guys, check it out. Loads of free content on YouTube. Just search Adam Carmichael. He's got all of the stuff on there. You definitely lots of valuable videos. So I highly recommend checking it out. We'll drop all his links in the description. So no worries there. Thank you so much, Adam. This was honestly really, really fun. I really like the psychological aspect and the process for dealing with it as well. You know, like there's a clear process and system for going through these things and tackling them. And, you know, guys, there's no quick fixes to these things, as you can see. Things take time. We're human beings, and you've really got to work on this behavior, and it takes some time, but you can do it. And like Adam said, these are skills. Anybody can learn them. So I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much again, Adam, for your time. This was great. Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.